Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Traumaplicity podcast with your host, Dr. Amanda Hellman, author, cognitive release coach, and speaker. And Traumaplicity is trauma and simplicity. And you might say, well, how do you bring that together? Well, our brain does better when it thinks simple, even if we have some complex trauma processes. And so Traumaplicity was born in helping us know that we can take one step at a time and get encouragement from amazing guests, from people such as Hope that I'll introduce in a moment, and other guests who share part of their story. They tell you some strategies they use that you can glean from, and then also to encourage you wherever you are in the journey. And so it's great to have all of you tuning in, and certainly want to do that every Wednesday. So with that said, I'm really excited to have our guest, Hope Clark, on the show. And 7 years ago, Hope began a journey to self-discovery and healing. She experienced a loss in family in early childhood when she walked away from a race-oriented belief system and married a Black man. Her emotional healing began when she was introduced to doTERRA essential oils, and she experienced a dramatic shift in her daughter's longtime respiratory infection, expanding her view on holistic healthcare. Then Hope began using them for her own emotional healing. She is now a certified essential oil specialist and has built a successful business in doTERRA, selling over $500,000 per year, empowering families and practitioners with high vibrational natural solutions and opening doors for financial freedom. Hope also wrote a book about emotional management called Master the Meltdown: 3 Steps to Shift Your State, and speaks to audiences who are learning how to leverage aromatherapy to manage their limbic brain for more intentional emotional processing practices. Again, so Hope, that's amazing. I love that you have a book and your journey, and we'll certainly hear more about that, but welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amanda. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And I love to talk about the limbic and emotional brain. So this is up my alley. Even though I know it's a short time, I could spend hours with it, but I know we'll keep to this focus. And certainly I know you shared a little bit of your journey, but I'd love for you to share with the audience part of your trauma story today.
Well, when you experience something like a loss, or what I guess you would call what we would experience as a betrayal or a feeling of deep loss, when that situation occurred with my family, it was something that felt like, okay, now that's over. That happened. Now I'm going to move on with my life. And I did that. But years build on years. And I found myself a young mother with small children in diapers and car seats, as many of us are. Life gets really busy. And the busyness, the life that I was living, I would experience these like boil ups within me. It was usually like 4 or 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's like I couldn't handle the stress level that was happening around me. And I would tell my kids, hey, mommy needs a break right now, so that I don't yell or slam my fist on the table or experience a blow up. And so I'd go to my closet and I would scream into a pillow in my closet or beat the pillow. I began exploring like, what's happening in my brain? What's happening inside of me? And I realized this is probably repressed emotions from my experience years before, where I thought I was over it, or I thought that was past. But that's what we do, right? We tend to, human nature tends to repress or stuff or hide something when we don't know what to do with it. But buried emotions never die. They will come back and bite you. So when that started happening, that's when I started researching neuroplasticity and neurotransmitters and the limbic brain. And that's about the time that oils came into my life. And I realized, oh my gosh, there's a gold mine here for me, not just health-wise for my family, but for me. I need to understand how to leverage aromatherapy to be able to manage and shift my brain and shift myself out of having these emotional meltdowns and actually process and integrate the trapped emotions.
That's
so
great.
That began the process.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing with vulnerability, your story, and just how things are busy. And by a certain 4 or 6 o'clock, you're like, okay, what's going on? And starting to figure out things and having that stress that a lot of times does happen. It's like all day and wow, where's this coming from? And I love that you said buried emotions never die. And it's very true. It's getting to that. So I love that story and how you figured out the brain and how the aromatherapy had worked for you, which is really amazing. Yeah. So thinking about that, I know you were talking about strategies, but in that time, were there other, like, how did you end up taking those things together? So you kind of talked about the culmination, but was there other people that also influenced you as you're like, okay, like the brain and then thinking about aromatherapy, or how did you bring that together?
I have some wonderful friends and mentors in my life that introduced personal development and authors and books and listening to speakers. And I started to listen to speakers like Abraham Hicks on YouTube, various mentors. And what I would hear, I began to hear this common theme that emotions begin as a thought. Thoughts lead to emotions, which then lead to the physical result. And so I started backtracking, like, well, if I'm having an emotional blow up, and I believe it's due to probably some built up betrayal or loss that I experienced that I don't know how to integrate because I didn't know how to integrate it. What was I thinking? And so I backtracked and I started tracking my thoughts. And I immediately saw a lot of my thoughts had to do with, I can't do this. There's not enough time. I never get enough help. I had a lot to do with lack and loss and not feeling supported enough. And I'm talking about something basic like dinner. Like I've got little kids and my husband's working. So of course I'm the one doing it all. But it felt really heavy in my space. Like nobody helps me. I can't get this all done. And when I began to just research, like, what is lack? What are lackful thinking? I mean, Google's a great help when you're trying to figure out what's going on in your brain. And realizing thoughts lead to the emotions, which leads to the action. So if we can get back to the thought, that's a clue as to what's inside of you. What's the vibrational bedrock that you're walking around with, like the vibrational base point you're walking around with. And when I really saw all my thoughts on one day listed out on this massive piece of paper, I probably had written down maybe 50 or 60. And I kid you not, like 99% of them were all negative thoughts. And they were all, I don't have enough. There'll never be enough time. I'm not fully supported. I'm not appreciated. Oh my gosh. No wonder I was having emotional blowups. And then I began to just allow myself to see that. Like that's the biggest first step, I feel, with working through trauma, is just acknowledging that it's there and looking at it. Not just saying, oh, I have trauma, but what is it? Is it fear of rejection? Was it loss? Was it abandonment? Was it betrayal? What was it? And then what does that feel like? And what thoughts is that producing currently today in your life? Because the truth is it happened 15 years ago or 20 years ago. And the problem isn't that, because it's over. The problem is what I'm thinking about it. That's what's creating my meltdown over dinner tonight. It's what I'm thinking about it. Realizing all of that, and I just started listening. Like I'd put in earbuds while I'm washing the dishes and I'd listen to a podcast, or I'd listen to somebody on YouTube about emotional management or neuroplasticity or neuroscience or the limbic brain. And I was just constantly like 15 minutes a day, every day. Like I need to learn something else so I can manage myself. That's where I began shifting, when I took personal responsibility for myself to learn the knowledge. And things shifted.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I love how you shared about just the power of thoughts. And it is just the power of our thoughts, and then even the emotions that are linked to it, but the power of those thoughts and how it can come up later. So thank you. And even just the ongoing pursuit of you wanting to move forward, which is part of that personal development, which is what you started with. So that's amazing. So thanks for sharing hope for even in the audience, if people are listening, that there's some area that it is possible to shift, to seek out that information, seek out people who like Hope have, come before to really pull you through into something new. And there's hope, and as in her name.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Yeah. And so looking at strategies, and you shared some, what are some 3 to 5 strategies that have helped you through this process of navigating the trauma, thinking about your thoughts, which you talked about, and doing what you do?
Well, the first thing that was difficult for me to break through, I come from a faith-based background, and I would add on to that a pretty religious background, although I wouldn't have said it at the time. But it's interesting how much having to be right and appropriate is built into the framework of that belief system. So just allowing myself to punch a pillow or to say a curse word out loud or to scream into a pillow, I had to get past that. I had to like allow myself to verbally express and feel the release of, or the vibrational release of, what that emotion was. Otherwise, it felt like it was pent up within my body, like it would get stuck inside my chest or my throat. And and I'd angry cry, but it didn't come out. Like I'm holding it in. So beginning to do physical practices where I allowed it to come out. At the time, I remember telling somebody, my most popular hobby right now is cry running in the rain, which felt embarrassing to say out loud, but it was the truth of it. Was I find that when I have a really angry day, and I live in Florida, so it tends to rain like every afternoon or evening half the year, I would go outside, and it didn't matter if it was raining. I would go outside and I would run, and the run would like, it would release endorphins. It would physically release out of my body. And if I needed to cry, I'd cry. So I'd go run on trails and cry. Just getting outside and releasing it, and then leveraging that release in my closet. Then the third one, that when oils came in and I began to learn how they cleaned off cell receptor sites in the brain, like that was an additional, I would sometimes layer those two things, because what would happen is I'd inhale pure peppermint oil and it would be really invigorating. Or breathe is a blend that has peppermint and eucalyptus in it, and it's really good for releasing grief, like physically integrating grief through the limbic brain. And it cleans off the cell receptor sites. So whatever I was just thinking on repeat, whatever that thought was that I recognized was really negative, like I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, it would disappear for a second as the cell receptor sites were cleaned off in my limbic brain. And I'm inhaling this peppermint and I'm feeling invigorated. And it made it so much easier for me to find a new thought, like I'm universally supported. Everything always works out for me, or I will get through this. And then that thought would now start running through my neurotransmitters. So much easier than if I still had the old thought trying to run through, like, like a train on a runaway rail station in my head. So those are just a few of the things. I would go running. I would go into my closet in a private, quiet space and give myself the freedom to yell or punch or hit something safely. And I'd inhale. I'd use aromatherapy. I mean, deep inhales where I can get it up into my limbic brain really quickly. But I would find if I could just give myself permission for a 10-minute break to do one of those things, I could really shift the trajectory of the next few hours.
That's powerful. Well, thank you for sharing about, and I love it, the endorphins being outside, even whatever that looks like. And even for people, if you're, depending where you are, even going to the mailbox, right? But just getting outside or doing some type of patterning. And I love that you said, like getting over I can just freely release your anger, whether it be in a pillow, because sometimes we don't, we're scared, right? A lot of times the trauma, some people might be like, oh my gosh, like I don't know what healthy anger is. So giving yourself permission, that was powerful that you shared that, because some people are going, no, like I don't know what that looks like. And it's like you needed that release, and that is what you needed.
It's funny that the programming we have, even as like, be good girls, be a good girl, or be a polite neighbor. So, if somebody lives in an apartment, but they need to scream, they're like, oh, well, I'm not allowed to because I live in an apartment. Or I'm not allowed to because I'm a good girl. Well, you better go find somewhere you can, like give yourself permission to.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. That's powerful. And yeah, and definitely, like you said, just having that time to be able to have your
Mhm.
aromatherapy, which is exactly what you've done. And so, before we move into just the empowerment and the encouragement hope for people, I know you wrote a book
Mhm.
and was wondering, do you want to share more about that? I'm not sure if you want to showcase that or tell us more. I'd love to hear it.
Well, as the book is really, it's a really easy read. It's a handful of chapters. It was designed to be an ebook, but it's printable. And so you can get it off of Amazon. I can give you the link so people have
Yeah.
access to that. It really just it's like I wanted to document what I was learning and
Mhm.
personal stories that was happening. I remember one particular day trying to get all the kids into the car at the same time, and we were running late. Minutes are ticking. The kids break out into a fight. You know, she pushed me, she touched me. I don't want to sit in this seat. We're now 7 minutes late. And it's boiling, it's building up within me. I can feel, okay, here goes the nervous system. Like it's ready to blow.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
and this is all I knew. I was still in the process of integrating trauma and abandonment from
Mhm.
10 years earlier. I knew
Mhm.
I've just hit some deep wells of anger that I didn't know were there. And they're showing up now, today, as real heightened parental responses to my kids that I don't want to be there. I don't want to be angry at my little toddlers because they're having a grumpy day. I want to be peaceful, happy, nice mommy. But I've got some trauma from 10 years ago that I've never dealt with, and it's surfacing now.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I would go from even keel to mad really fast. I watched it happen over and over. And so I would document a handful of these stories into this book.
Mhm.
And what I found in the moment was I began to become aware of what my thoughts were as they were building, and as
Mhm.
like my neck is getting red and I can feel anger moving through my body. Like, and I began to recognize the signs, recognize the thoughts, and catch myself. And so then I would like pause. I would go inhale oils for 60 seconds, or I'd get out of the car, run around the house, come back into the car. I mean, sounds ridiculous, but
Yeah.
I gave myself permission to go
Mhm.
do what I knew. It's going to release endorphins. It's going to
Mhm.
it's going to help me exhale really fast, because I had started studying people like Dr. Candace Pert, and neuroscientists. And I began like just putting some of their excerpts, some of their information into a document that I
Yeah.
began. And I turned it into several chapters. And
Mhm.
and for myself, I began teaching my children a 3-step process I call
Mhm.
the 3 I's. It's all about I. I am in control. And the first step is identify where you are in the second. Like, what
Mhm.
thought are you thinking right now? What is happening right now? Identify where you are emotionally at the second. Interrupt the brain signals with any number of things we just talked about. Get
Mhm.
outside, get endorphins moving, or
Mhm.
access your limbic brain with aromatherapy, and then install a new belief.
Mhm.
I. And it began to work like clockwork. Like,
Mhm.
if I would implement this, I could de-escalate my experience and keep my kids safe and myself safe in that environment. And it helped me in the process of understanding our trauma has to be released. You have to integrate through it. You can't just leave it buried forever.
Yeah.
But it seems that for some of us, our traumas begin to surface when we're in adulthood and we're
Mhm.
responsible for other lives, whether we're a manager at a store, or we're a business partner employing employees, or we're a mom now with kids. And here your trauma is surfacing from 10 or 20 years ago in your childhood. What are you going to do with it? Like, how do you manage integrating your trauma when you've got others that you're responsible for, and you don't want to you don't want to vomit your trauma on other people?
Mhm.
So some of these practical steps have helped me de-escalate the trauma in the moment and become really aware of it, so that then later on in the evening or that weekend, I would spend an hour to 2 hours. Then I'm journaling out. What am I really feeling? What is surfacing? What can I do forgiveness work around? What do I need to go back and have a real honest conversation about,
Mhm.
so that I really can begin to integrate that trauma. And I've done some incredible personal development courses. I've done some incredible forgiveness work. I've really given myself a lot of freedom and ease in this body over the last 5-10 years. But these tools here we're talking about really helped me begin the integration process, when otherwise I don't know what I would have done. I had little kids. Either I would have been a really abusive mom, or I would have just stuffed it down deeper and made myself a really toxic adult later on.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, and especially hope just the discovery that you had of your 3 eyes, and how you use that to help yourself so that you could move forward and also be more present, even though all this trauma was, like, I always say, go back to Bessel van der Kolk, but the body keeps score. So having us in adulthood learning that, so that's powerful. So certainly, audience, if you heard this and this resonates with you, and with Hope, certainly I'll have her information. I'll have her book link above on the podcast and on Apple, the YouTube channel, as well as other places. So certainly you can get in touch with Hope. And so, as we move to our final question, what would be some encouragement, Hope, for maybe perhaps moms who were just starting that journey, maybe where you were, and you're like, what is going on, to those who were maybe continual in the journey and they're like, what do I do? Just want to hear some of your encouragement.
Gosh, it's going to feel terrifying. It's going to feel horrifying. You're going to think you're dying. You're going to think like you're the worst person in the world. You might cry a lot. But that really is, I realized one day, it feels like a death. It feels like I'm experiencing death. And I realized I'm experiencing the death of who I have been. This person that holds on to trauma and still pushes through her life like nitty gritty with her hands gripping the steering wheel. That person is now dying. And I am releasing that person, and I'm deliberately choosing a new, freer, lighter way of navigating the earth. And I am determined to do it for myself, and for my 3 daughters, and for my husband, and for anyone else I come into contact with. So I kept that as a guiding focus, that it may get darker before the dawn. But man, when the sun comes up, when you start feeling that freedom, when you start recognizing what's happening, you recognize the release of grief or betrayal or unforgiveness from your body, and you experience freedom and light and ease in your body. Oh my gosh, like ropes can't tie you down. Like, you're so free. It's amazing. So I would encourage anyone, find safe spaces and give yourself complete permission to express, to write, to journal, to scream, to cry. Create some pockets of practice throughout your day, even if it's 5 minutes a day. Give it to yourself. You can do it.
That's powerful. Thank you. Yeah, definitely going through that pain doesn't always feel so great, but it leads to, as you said, life and liberty and more freedom and just more life, like that abundance that you're in. So thank you for sharing that. And certainly, audience, wherever you are, there's that hope from Hope to have you keep moving forward. So certainly it's been wonderful talking with you, Hope, and her information there. Certainly you can ask me questions. And if you have any questions for Hope, I'll have her information. And so with that, audience, just always want to leave you with the encouragement that you can come back next week. You can certainly keep moving forward with hearing from different people, and that you are loved, valued, and you matter no matter what at all times. So certainly keep moving forward and know that people care, I care, and we want you to keep moving forward. So with that said, have a great day, and talk to you next time on Traumaplicity podcast. Thanks again, Hope. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.